Admiral Du Young stood at the large window of the Galactic Council's main chamber. His fingers touched the cold glass as he watched the ships move through space. Each ship glowed with bright blue engine lights against the darkness. The sight usually made him feel proud, but not today. Today, those ships reminded him of how weak they had become. He turned away from the window when he heard the door open. 12 council members walked into the room. Their long silver robes swept the floor as they took their seats at the round table. Du Young straightened his dark blue uniform and walked to the front of the room. His heart beat faster, but his face stayed calm. "Members of the council," he said, his voice strong and clear. "3 days ago, we lost contact with the colony on New Mars. Today, I must tell you that we have also lost contact with Europa Station and the settlements on Titan." The room stayed quiet, but Du Young saw fear in their eyes. These people weren't used to bad news. The Galactic Council had kept peace for 300 years. Their technology was the best in known space. Their citizens lived comfortable lives. But now, that peace was ending. "The Valkyrie ships are moving faster than we expected," Du Young continued. He pressed a button on his wrist device. A large map appeared in the air above the table. Red dots showed where the enemy ships were. "They will reach our core worlds in less than 2 months. One of the council members, a woman named Yurin, spoke up. "But our defense systems are the strongest in the galaxy. Surely they can't break through." Du Young shook his head. "The Valkyrie aren't fighting like anyone we've seen before. They use biological weapons that eat through our shields. Their ships are simple, but they have so many that our defense systems get overwhelmed. We've lost every battle so far." Minister Kim stood up suddenly. His face was red with anger. "Then we must build more ships. Better weapons. We have the best scientists in the galaxy." "We don't have time," Du Young said quietly. "But we do have one option left." He paused, knowing what he was about to say would shock them. "We need to wake up General Kim Ji-won." The room exploded with noise. Some council members jumped to their feet. Others started shouting. Minister Kim's face went from red to white. "The human," Yeren whispered. "But that's just a story we tell children. A legend." Du Young smiled slightly. "No, Council Member Yeren. The human general is very real. For 300 years, we have kept General Kim Ji-won in cryosleep, waking her only when we face war. The last time was 200 years ago, during the Robot Rebellion." "This is absurd," Minister Kim said. "You want us to trust our defense to a human from the past. To a primitive. That primitive saved our entire civilization during the First Contact War," Du Young answered. "When the mechs attacked us, we had better technology. But we didn't know how to fight. We were losing until we found Earth and met General Ji-won. She taught us that war isn't just about having the best weapons. It's about strategy, about understanding how your enemy thinks." He touched his wrist device again. The map disappeared, replaced by old battle recordings. They showed massive space battles, ships moving in ways that seemed impossible. "This is how General Ji-won fought. She didn't just use our technology. She changed how we thought about warfare." The council members watched in silence. Even Minister Kim sat back down, his eyes fixed on the images above the table. "I studied every battle she commanded," Du Young continued. "Her mind works differently than ours. We think in straight lines, in perfect patterns. She thinks in ways we can't predict. And that means our enemies can't predict her either." Yeren leaned forward. "But if she's so valuable, why do we put her back in cryosleep after each war?" Du Young's face grew serious. "Because she asked us to. After the First Contact War, General Ji-won saw how peace changed us. She said that a society of peace needs warriors who understand war, but those warriors shouldn't live in peacetimes. She offered to sleep until we needed her again." The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, the head of the council, an old man named Taiwan, spoke. "How long will it take to wake her?" The facility is on New Seoul, Du Young answered. I can have her awake in 12 hours. Taiwan looked around the table. One by one, the council members nodded. Even Minister Kim gave a short, sharp nod. Then go, Taiwan said. Wake our general. 6 hours later, Du Young stood in a cold room deep underground on New Seoul. The walls were made of smooth white metal, and soft blue lights glowed along the floor. In the center of the room was a large metal cylinder, covered in frost. Medical officers moved around the cylinder, checking readings on their devices. Du Young watched as they pressed buttons and turned dials. Slowly, the frost began to melt. Life signs are strong, one of the medical officers said. Brain activity is increasing. Du Young stepped closer. Through the clear top of the cylinder, he could see General Ji-won's face. She looked young, maybe 30 years old. Her black hair was cut short, and her face was peaceful. It was hard to believe this woman had commanded armies that saved civilizations. The cylinder made a soft hissing sound as it opened. Warm air rushed in, and Ji-won's chest rose with a deep breath. Her eyes opened slowly, then focused on Du Young's face. What year is it? She asked. Her voice was rough from sleep, but strong. Year 2784 by Earth calendar, Du Young answered. Ji-won sat up slowly, helped by the medical officers. And why have you woken me? We're at war, Du Young said. We're losing. Ji-won nodded, as if she had expected this answer. She swung her legs over the side of the cylinder and stood up. The medical officers tried to help her, but she waved them away. Despite centuries of sleep, she stood straight and steady. Tell me about the enemy, she said. For the next hour, Du Young explained everything about the Valdari. Ji-won listened without interrupting. She asked for a device to look at battle records and studied them carefully. Sometimes she would pause a recording and stare at it, her eyes narrow with concentration. Finally, she looked up at Du Young. Your ships are beautiful, she said. Too beautiful. You've forgotten that warships aren't supposed to be beautiful. They're supposed to be effective. She stood up and walked to a large screen showing the Valdari fleet movements. Your enemy isn't as strong as you think. They're using your own habits against you. You fight like you live, in perfect patterns, following rules. They've learned your rules, and now they're breaking them. Can you help us? Du Young asked. Ji-won turned to face him. Her eyes were sharp and alert, showing no sign of her long sleep. Yes, she said, but you won't like how I do it. Your civilization has spent 300 years learning to be peaceful. I'm going to teach you how to be warriors again. She walked across the room to where a uniform was waiting for her. It was the same style as Du Young's, but with different markings. Have there been many changes to ship controls in the last 50 years? No, Du Young said. The basic systems are the same. Good. Ji-won picked up the uniform. I need a ship, something fast, with a small crew. And I need all the information you have about the Valdari's biological weapons. You'll have everything you need, Du Young promised. The council has given you full authority. Ji-won smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that made Du Young understand why she had become a legend. They always do, she said, because they know what I know. Sometimes you need someone who remembers the old ways. Someone who knows that peace isn't just about being peaceful. Sometimes peace is about knowing how to fight. She looked at the battle recordings again, her eyes focused on the Valdari ships. Your enemy thinks they understand war because they know how to attack. But they don't understand war. Not really. She turned to Du Young, and her smile was gone. I do. And soon, they're going to learn what that means. Du Young felt a shiver run down his spine. He had studied Ji-won's battles, read about her strategies, but now he understood why the old records described her as both inspiring and frightening. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a reminder of a time when humans had to fight to survive, when they learned lessons that his civilization had chosen to forget. As he watched her study the battle plans, Du Young realized that the council had made the right choice. The Valderi had awakened something they didn't understand, not just a human general, but a part of history that his people had tried to leave behind. And now that history was awake, standing in this room, preparing to teach them all what it really meant to fight a war. The peace of 300 years was about to end. But maybe, Du Young thought, that was the price of keeping that peace for 300 more. Captain Lee Sun-mei stood outside the war room, trying to stay calm. She had spent 5 years training to be the best tactical officer in the fleet. Now she was about to meet the legendary General Kim Ji-won. Her orders were simple. Help the general understand modern military systems. But how do you teach someone who had won more battles than most people had even studied? The door opened, and Admiral Du Young stepped out. "She's ready to see you, Captain," he said. His face looked tired. They had spent the last 3 days showing Ji-won everything about the current war. Sun-mei walked into the room. The walls were covered with glowing screens showing battle maps and enemy movements. In the middle of all this technology stood General Ji-won, wearing a simple uniform and studying a hand-drawn map on paper. "General," Sun-mei said, standing straight, "I'm Captain Lee Sun-mei. I'm here to assist you with our modern systems." Ji-won looked up from her paper map. Her eyes were sharp and focused. "Tell me, Captain, what do you see in these Valderi attack patterns?" She pointed to one of the screens. Sun-mei looked at the screen carefully. She had studied these patterns many times. They attack in waves, overwhelming our shield systems. They're biological weapons. "No," Ji-won interrupted. "Don't tell me what they do. Tell me what you see." Sun-mei blinked, confused. She looked at the screen again, trying to understand what the general meant. The Valderi ships moved across the screen in their usual pattern. First the small ships, then the larger ones carrying their biological weapons. "They're scared," Sun-mei said slowly, surprising herself. "The small ships go first because they're testing our defenses. They don't want to risk their weapon ships until they're sure it's safe." Ji-won smiled. It was the first time Sun-mei had seen her smile. "Exactly. Everyone focuses on their weapons, their numbers. But look at how they fight. They're cautious. They don't take risks, which means they're afraid of losing." She walked to another screen showing the Council's defense fleet. "Your ships are beautiful. Perfect formations, perfect timing, perfect responses to every attack." She touched the screen. "And that's why you're losing." "I don't understand," Sun-mei said. "Sit down, Captain," Ji-won said, pointing to a chair. "Let me tell you about the First Contact War. When the mechs attacked Earth, they had better technology than us, better weapons, better shields, but they fought like machines, perfectly, predictably. So we learned to be unpredictable." Ji-won picked up her paper map. "The Council's military has become like the mechs. You fight perfectly, following all the rules. The Valderi learned your rules, and now they use them against you. We need to change the rules." For the next few hours, Ji-won explained her plan. She wanted to break up the fleet into smaller groups. Instead of fighting in perfect formations, they would fight in chaos. Some ships would hide in asteroid fields. Others would shut down their engines and drift, waiting to ambush enemy ships. "But that's not how our fleet is designed to work," Sun-mei protested. "Our systems are made for coordinated attacks." "Then we'll change them," Ji-won said simply. "Your ships have backup controls, yes. Manual systems in case the main computers fail. Yes, but nobody uses them. They're too basic. They're exactly what we need." Ji-won stood up and walked to a large screen showing the Valderi fleet's next target, a colony world called New Eden. "The Valderi will attack here in 6 days. They expect to find your fleet in perfect defense formation. Instead, they'll find chaos." Sun-mei spent the next few days helping Ji-won prepare. They selected crew members who could adapt to the new strategy. Many of the fleet's best officers couldn't handle fighting without computer assistance, but they found others. pilots who liked to fly their ships manually for fun, engineers who understood the old backup systems. Not everyone agreed with Jai-1's plan. Minister Park Han-bin called an emergency council meeting 3 days before the expected attack on New Eden. "This is madness," he said, his voice echoing in the council chamber. "You want us to turn off our advanced systems, to fight like primitives." Jai-1 stood calmly before the council. "Your advanced systems are predictable. The Valdari have learned to counter them. We need to show them something they haven't seen before." "And what happens to New Eden if your plan fails?" Minister Park demanded. "If we keep fighting your way, New Eden will fall." "That's not a possibility. It's a certainty. I'm offering a chance to save it." The council argued for hours. Sun Mai watched as Jai-1 answered their questions patiently, explaining her strategy again and again. Finally, head counselor Ta-1 raised his hand for silence. "General Jai-1 has won more battles than anyone in this room has even seen," he said quietly. "We woke her for a reason. Let her fight this battle her way." The next 3 days were the busiest of Sun Mai's life. They trained crews to fight without computer assistance. Ji-1 worked with small groups, teaching them old combat techniques that had been forgotten. She showed them how to use sensor shadows to hide ships, how to use gravity wells to change course without engines. "Your enemy thinks they know everything about how you fight," Jai-1 told the crews. "They expect perfection. We're going to show them chaos instead." The night before the battle, Sun Mai found Jai-1 in the war room, still studying her maps. "General," she said, "may I ask you something?" Jai-1 nodded without looking up. "Why did you choose to sleep? Why not stay awake and teach us these things?" Jai-1 was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at Sun Mai. "Because peace is precious. A peaceful society needs to forget some things about war. But someone needs to remember, to keep those memories safe until they're needed again." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fleet preparing for battle. "Tomorrow, I'm going to teach your people how to fight again. But after we win this war, they need to forget. They need to go back to building beautiful ships and flying in perfect formations. That's what peace looks like. And you'll go back to sleep," Sun Mai said. "Yes. Until the next time I'm needed." Jai-1 turned away from the window. "But right now, we have a battle to prepare for. Are the ship crews ready?" Sun Mai nodded. "As ready as they can be. Many of them are scared of fighting without computer control." "Good," Jai-1 said. "Fear keeps you alert. Fear makes you think. The Valdari have forgotten how to be afraid because they've won too easily. Tomorrow, we'll remind them." She pointed to a star map showing New Eden. "Your fleet would defend here, in this perfect formation. Instead, we'll scatter our ships through this whole sector. Some will hide in the asteroid field. Others will drift with their engines off, looking like debris, when the Valdari arrive expecting another easy victory. We'll show them chaos," Sun Mai finished. Jai-1 smiled. "Exactly. Now, let's go over the plan one more time. Tomorrow, we teach the Valdari that not everything in this galaxy follows their rules." As Sun Mai listened to Jai-1 explain the battle plan again, she understood why the general had become a legend. She didn't just know how to fight. She knew how to change how people thought about fighting. Tomorrow, they would either prove that her old ways still worked, or they would lose New Eden. But looking at Jai-1's confident face as she explained the strategy, Sun Mai felt something she hadn't felt since the war began. Hope. Tomorrow, they would show the Valdari something new, something unpredictable, something human. The bridge of the command ship was dark except for the glow of emergency lights. General Kim Ji-1 stood next to Captain Lee Sun Mai, both watching the main screen. It showed empty space around New Eden, but they knew the Valdari fleet would arrive soon. "All ships report ready," Sun Mai said quietly. She looked at her display, checking the positions of their hidden fleet one more time. Some ships floated silent in the asteroid field. Others drifted with their engines cold, looking like space debris. None of them followed the usual perfect formations. Jai-1 nodded. "Tell them to wait for my signal. No one moves until I give the order, no matter what they see." The minutes passed slowly. Sun Mai watched Jai-1's face in the dim light. The general showed no sign of worry or doubt. She simply waited, like a hunter watching for prey. The sensor officer spoke suddenly. "Multiple ships entering the system. Valderi signatures confirmed." On the main screen, the enemy fleet appeared. First came their scout ships, moving in their usual careful pattern. Behind them, larger ships carried their biological weapons. "They're searching for our defense fleet," Sun Mai said. "They expect to find us in formation near the planet." "Let them search," Jai-1 replied. Fear grows in empty space. The Valderi ships moved closer to New Eden. Their formation was perfect, just as Jai-1 had predicted. They had fought so many battles against the Council's predictable defenses that they had become predictable themselves. "They're starting to spread out," the sensor officer reported. "They seem confused by the lack of resistance." Jai-1 smiled. "Good. The more they spread out, the better." She turned to Sun Mai. "Send the signal to Blue Group. Tell them to power up and attack, just like we planned." Sun Mai sent the order. In the asteroid field, 10 Council ships came to life. They burst out of hiding, engines burning bright, and attacked the rear of the Valderi fleet. The enemy ships turned to face this new threat, but they moved slowly, unsure how to react to such an unusual attack. Before they could organize a proper response, Jai-1 gave another order. "Red Group, begin your attack run. Target their command ships." More Council ships appeared, rising up from their hiding places below the enemy fleet. They fired from unexpected angles, their manual targeting allowing them to shoot in ways the Valderi's computers couldn't predict. "They're trying to form a defensive circle," Sun Mai reported, watching the enemy ships struggle to respond. "Now they're afraid," Jai-1 said. "Time for the final surprise. All remaining ships, power up and attack. Show them what chaos really looks like." Across the battlefield, the rest of the Council fleet came to life. Ships that had looked like debris suddenly fired their engines. Others jumped out from behind moons and planets. They attacked from every direction, following no pattern the enemy could understand. The Valderi fleet tried to respond, but their formations fell apart. Their careful battle plans meant nothing against an enemy that didn't follow the rules. Ships carrying biological weapons found themselves cut off from their escorts. Command ships lost contact with their squadrons. "Their flagship is trying to coordinate a retreat," Sun Mai said, watching the enemy communications. Jai-1 pointed to a group of Council ships. "Order those ships to cut off their escape route. The Valderi need to learn that attacking us has consequences." The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was clear. The Valderi fleet broke apart under the constant attacks from unexpected directions. Some ships managed to escape, but most were destroyed or captured. When it was over, Sun Mai looked at the battlefield on her screen. Debris floated everywhere, mixed with damaged ships from both sides. It wasn't a clean victory like the Council usually wanted. It was messy and violent, but it was a victory. "We lost 23 ships," she reported to Jai-1. "But the Valderi lost more than half their fleet." Jai-1 nodded. "The ships we can replace. The important thing is what we taught them today. They learned that their understanding of warfare was incomplete." The next few days were busy as the Council tried to understand what had happened. Minister Park Han-bin called another emergency meeting to discuss the battle. "Yes, we won," he said, his voice angry. "But look at how we won. Our ships are damaged. Our crews are traumatized from fighting without computer assistance. This isn't how we wage war." Jai-1 stood before the Council again, her uniform still showing marks from the battle. "No, it isn't how you wage war. It's how you win war. Your enemy thought they knew everything about fighting because they knew your patterns. We showed them something they didn't understand, and it frightened them. But the cost," Minister Park started, "was less than losing New Eden." Jai-1 interrupted. War always has a cost. The choice isn't between paying and not paying. The choice is what price you're willing to pay for victory. The debate continued, but the results spoke for themselves. Reports came in from other sectors. The Valdari were pulling back, retreating from recently conquered territories. Their confidence was shaken. Admiral Du Young shared the intelligence reports with Jai-1 and Sun Mai in the war room. "They're afraid of what other surprises we might have," he said. "Their commanders are arguing about how to fight an enemy they can't predict." "Good," Jai-1 said. "Now we press our advantage. Captain Lee, are the fleet crews ready for more training?" Sun Mi nodded. After the battle at New Eden, more ship crews had volunteered to learn the old ways of fighting. They had seen how effective it could be. "We'll teach them more," Jai-1 said. "The Valdari think they've seen all our tricks. They haven't seen anything yet." Over the next few weeks, Jai-1 worked with the fleet, teaching them more of what she called human warfare. She showed them how to use solar radiation to hide ships, how to turn space itself into a weapon. The crews learned to think differently, to see battle as more than just following computer instructions. Sun Mai watched as the fleet changed. The ships were still beautiful, still advanced, but now they could fight in ways the enemy couldn't predict. They learned to be both modern and primitive, to use technology and instinct together. One evening, she found Jai-1 in the war room again, planning the next attack. "The crews are learning quickly," Sun Mai said. "They're starting to understand your ways." "They're remembering," Jai-1 corrected her. "Deep in their minds, they remember when their ancestors had to fight to survive. I'm just helping them find those memories." She pointed to a map showing Valdari territory. "Their empire is built on the idea that they can predict and control everything. We're teaching them that the galaxy is more complex than that. Sometimes, chaos is stronger than order." Sun Mi looked at the map. The Valdari had seemed unstoppable just weeks ago. Now they were retreating, confused and afraid. All because one human general had taught them that warfare wasn't just about having the best weapons or the most ships. "Will they adapt?" she asked. "Will they learn to fight like us?" Jai-1 smiled. "They might try. But they don't understand the most important thing about human warfare. It's not just about being unpredictable. It's about being able to change, to think in new ways. By the time they learn to fight like we do now, we'll be fighting differently again." She turned back to her battle plans. "That's the real lesson we're teaching them. War isn't just about weapons or tactics. It's about the mind that uses them, and the human mind." She tapped her head. "That's something they'll never fully understand." 3 months had passed since the Battle of New Eden. The Galactic Council's main chamber was brighter now, filled with morning light from the huge windows. Captain Lee Sun Mi stood next to Admiral Du Young, watching General Kim Ji-won address the council for the last time. "The Valdari have signed the peace treaty," Jai-1 said, her voice strong and clear. "Their fleet has withdrawn from all council territories. Their leaders have agreed to limits on their biological weapons." Head Counselor Ta-1 nodded slowly. "Thanks to you, General. Your strategies changed the course of this war." "No," Jai-1 said. "The victory belongs to your fleet. They remembered how to be warriors when they needed to be. Now they need to remember how to be peacekeepers again." Minister Park Han-bin shifted in his seat. The victory had changed his opinion of Jai-1's methods, but he still looked uncomfortable. "And what about the changes you made to our military? The new fighting techniques, the manual combat training?" "Keep them," Jai-1 said. "But keep them hidden, like a weapon in a locked drawer. Take your beautiful ships and put them back in their perfect formations. Let your crews return to their computer-controlled precision. But remember that chaos exists when you need it." Sun Mi felt her throat tighten. She knew what was coming next. They all did. "It's time for me to return to sleep," Jai-1 announced. The room went quiet. "The war is over. Peace needs to return, and peace has no place for warriors like me." Admiral Du Young stepped forward. "The cryosleep chamber is ready, General. But first, The council has a request. Jai-Wan raised an eyebrow, waiting. We want to record your knowledge, Du-Young said. Not just the battle tactics, but your understanding of warfare itself. Captain Lee has volunteered to work with you for the next week, documenting everything you can teach us. Sun Lee held her breath. They hadn't told Jai-Wan about this plan, worried she might refuse. The general was quiet for a long moment. You understand that writing down these lessons goes against the very reason I choose to sleep? Jai-Wan asked. The knowledge of warfare should fade in times of peace. We're not asking for a public record, Tai-Wan explained. The documents will be sealed, stored with your cryosleep chamber. If we need to wake you again, your replacement will have access to them. They will help us prepare, help us remember more quickly. Jai-Wan looked at Sun Mei. And you volunteered for this, Captain? Yes, General. Sun Mei stood straighter. I've learned more from you than just battle tactics. I've learned about the balance between peace and war, about the price of keeping our civilization safe. These lessons shouldn't be lost. A small smile appeared on Jai-Wan's face. Very well. 1 week. But after that, I return to sleep, and these records are sealed. The next 7 days were intense. Sun Mei worked with Jai-Wan from morning until night, recording everything the general could teach them. They covered battle strategies and fleet movements, but also deeper lessons about the nature of warfare itself. The biggest mistake peaceful people make, Jai-Wan explained one evening, is thinking that war follows rules. War is about breaking rules, about doing what your enemy thinks is impossible. But that knowledge is dangerous in peacetime. It makes people forget the value of rules, of order. Sun Mi typed quickly, trying to capture every word. Is that why you choose to sleep? To protect peace from these ideas? Partly, Jai-Wan said. But I also sleep because war changes people. It changes how they think, how they see the world. I've fought in too many wars, seen too much destruction. Sleep keeps those changes contained, prevents them from spreading to your peaceful society. On the final day, they gathered in the cryosleep facility on New Seoul. The room was cold and quiet, just as it had been when they woke Jai-Wan months ago. The sealed records sat in a secure container next to the cryosleep chamber. Sun Mei stood with Admiral Du-Young and several council members, watching as Jai-Wan prepared for her long sleep. The general had changed back into the simple uniform she wore when they first woke her. The chamber is ready, the medical officer announced. Jai-Wan turned to face them. Remember what I taught you, but don't let it change who you are. Keep building your beautiful ships. Keep making peace with new civilizations, but keep a little chaos hidden away, just in case you need it again. She looked at Sun Mi. Captain Lee, you've learned more than just my lessons. You've learned to see war and peace as two sides of the same coin. Use that wisdom wisely. Sun Mi felt tears in her eyes, but kept her voice steady. Thank you, General. Sleep well. Jai-Wan stepped into the chamber and lay down. The medical officers began the freezing process. As frost started to form on the chamber's clear top, Jai-Wan spoke one last time. Wake me if you need me, but try not to need me. Then her eyes closed, and the chamber sealed with a soft hiss. The medical officers checked the readings and nodded. General Kim Ji-won was asleep again, waiting for the next time her skills would be needed. Later that evening, Sun Mi stood at the window in the war room, looking out at the fleet. The ships were back in their perfect formations, their movements precise and controlled. But she knew they were different now. Inside each ship, the crews carried the memory of fighting differently, of using chaos as a weapon. Admiral Du-Young joined her at the window. The council has promoted you, he said. You'll be teaching at the Fleet Academy now. A new course about military history and strategy. Sun Li nodded. Will I be allowed to use what General Jai-Wan taught us? Some of it, Du-Young said. The basic principles, the importance of adaptability. But the specific tactics, the deeper lessons about warfare, those stay sealed with her. She changed us, Sun Mi said quietly. Not just how we fight, but how we think about fighting. Do Young smiled. That's her real legacy. Not the victory over the Valdari, but the understanding she left us. We're still a peaceful civilization, but now we remember that peace sometimes needs guardians who understand war. They stood in silence, watching the ships move through space. Somewhere deep below them, General Kim Ji-won slept, carrying the knowledge of warfare that their civilization needed but didn't want to remember. And Sun Mi knew that someday, when peace was threatened again, they would wake their sleeping warrior, and she would teach them once more how to fight with both technology and instinct, with both order and chaos. But for now, peace returned. The ships flew in their beautiful patterns, and the galaxy moved forward. The story of the human general became a legend again, whispered by crews on long space voyages. And in her frozen sleep, Jae-won waited, ready to wake when she was needed, ready to remind them that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways.